broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and a warm welcome to all. I am Ridhan on behalf of K Ratings. Welcome you to our today's webinar on expectations from the Union Budget. We appreciate your time in joining us for this webinar. Our speakers for today is Ms. Kavita Chacko, Associate Director and Senior Economist, and Saurabh Bhalerao, Associate Director, Industry Research. The discussion is in form of a presentation which is visible on your screen. We'll be having a Q&A session no sooner the presentation ends. May I request Kavita to begin the proceedings?
Good afternoon and a warm welcome to all. In this webinar, we present our expectations and wish list from the Union Budget 2020-21 for the general economy and for various sectors. The general expectation from the budget 2021 is that the government would announce a host of measures aimed at the revival of the domestic economy, which has seen growth fall to a 11-year low in the current financial year. Herein, we believe that the budget would primarily be oriented towards raising investment and consumption levels, which would involve employment generation. This could largely be through the infrastructure development route and entails the government incurring higher capital expenditure. The higher allocations towards infrastructure and the resultant employment opportunities generated would in turn lead to higher consumption. In terms of tax relief, there could be some limited measures announced on the personal tax front to provide some support for consumption. We believe that the government may go in for limited flexibility in the fiscal policy given the challenges being faced on the revenue side and in balancing the budget in the current financial year. Also, some sector-specific measures and reforms that have been coming in the way of output or weighing down the sectors could find mention in the budget. But this may be limited as the government has already been proactively announcing several such measures in the last few months. We elaborate further on our budget expectations. In order to stimulate economic activity, the government could incur higher expenditure in 2021. Given that domestic economic growth in recent times has been largely led by government or public spending amid subdued private consumption and investment. This would require the government to reconsider the fiscal consolidation roadmap of bringing down the fiscal deficit to 3% of GDP by 2020-21. The intended fiscal consolidation plan would have to be pushed forward to later years when domestic economic growth picks up. Moreover, with revenue collections being lower than expected due to weakness in economic growth, the central government is most likely to breach the gross fiscal deficit target of 3.3% of GDP for 2019-20 by around 0.6 to 0.8%, which would essentially take the revised fiscal deficit for the year to 3.9 to 4.1% of GDP. If the government is to adopt a flexible fiscal policy for 2020-21 and increase the fiscal deficit by 0.5%, then, assuming a nominal GDP growth of 10% for the year, the quantum of incremental fiscal deficit would be higher by around rupees 1.10 lakh crores, which can be directly used towards capital expenditure. In case the fiscal deficit is increased by 1% above the current stated target, the quantum of increase in fiscal deficit would be over 2 lakh crores. It needs to be seen if the government opts for a higher fiscal deficit. In case of a higher fiscal deficit, it would necessarily involve higher market borrowings. If the fiscal deficit is increased by 0.5% in the coming financial year from the stated target, then the gross market borrowings, as per our estimation, would range between 7.5 to 7.75 lakh crores. Coming to how much expenditure the government could incur in the coming financial year. Based on the trend growth rate, the total expenditure of the government could increase from rupees 27.8 lakh crores as budgeted in the 2019-20 budget to around rupees 30.5 lakh crores in 2021. Consequently, the capital expenditure, which includes public debt and loans, which on an average accounts for 13% of total expenditure, would increase from rupees 3.38 lakh crores to around 4 lakh crores. Capital outlay, on the other hand, which is the expenditure towards capital asset creation, which on an average accounts for 11.5% of total expenditure, would see an increase from 3.11 lakh crores to 3.52 lakh crores. If the fiscal deficit target is relaxed by 0.5 to 1%, and assuming that the additional fiscal deficit is entirely used for infrastructure development, the capital expenditure would be in the range of rupees 5.1 to 6.2 lakh crores. This would be a substantial sum of money to provide a stimulus on the fiscal side. It must be kept in mind that of the rupees 3.36 lakh crores of capex projected for FY20, a little more than 30% is for defense, a part of which could be import-based. The increased capital expenditure would essentially be towards infrastructure projects, namely those that have been detailed in the National Infrastructure Pipeline. We feel nearly 40% of the capex would be towards the rail and road transport sector. Housing and urban development is the other important component, which has a share of around 6%. In case of welfare schemes, in the last 4 years, the allocations by the central government towards various welfare schemes pertaining to women and children, senior citizens, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, minorities, health, education, and employment has seen a steady increase. Based on the trend growth rate, we expect allocations for the welfare programs in 2021 to increase by around 10%, which would translate to rupees 2.4 lakh crores. Of the various centrally sponsored schemes, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Program, or MNREGA, accounts for the higher share of around 18%. Although the allocations towards MNREGA declined marginally in the 2019-20 budget, we believe there would be around 10% increase in allocations made towards this scheme in the upcoming budget, as it is directly linked with rural employment. Coming to income tax. Although we do not foresee a cut in income tax rates, we expect revisions in the tax deductions that could benefit taxpayers belonging to different income groups and could increase their disposable income and thereby overall consumption. Herein, the budget could see an increase in standard deductions from the current rupees 50,000 to rupees 75,000 per annum. Also, deductions for investments under Section 80C could be increased from rupees 1.5 lakhs to rupees 2 lakhs. Deductions for contributions to the National Pension Scheme could be increased from rupees 50,000 to rupees 1 lakh. Also, deductions of interest paid on housing loans could be increased from rupees 2 lakhs to 2.5 lakhs. There could also be an increase in the additional interest deductions for first-time home buyers who have borrowed during 1st April 2019 to 31st March 2020 from the current rupees 1.5 lakhs to rupees 2 lakhs. These measures could provide a boost to the real estate sector. The budget may also abolish the dividend distribution tax to do away with multiplicity of taxes for companies. However, dividends would be taxable at the hands of the receiver of the benefit at the existing slab rates. Consequent to the removal of DDT, the tax on dividend income above rupees 10 lakhs would cease to be applicable. The long-term capital gains tax LTCG of 10% for gains over rupees 1 lakh, which was introduced in 2018-19, may also be removed. The holding period for availing LTCG could, however, be raised from 1 year to 2 years. This would by and large be a positive for long-term investors. Also, to encourage hedging of commodities and to lower cost of transaction in commodity derivatives, the budget may remove or cut commodity transaction tax, which is currently rupees 1,000 per rupees 1 crore of trade, on non-agri and agri-processed commodity derivatives. The disinvestment target for 2021 is likely to be rupees 1 lakh crores, which is 10,000 crores lower than the budgeted target for 2019-20. Herein, the timelines for disinvestment could be specified for 2021. The government is likely to bring down their stake in certain public sector undertakings to below 51%. In the absence of BPCL disinvestment happening in the current fiscal, this could be a major sale in FY21 along with Air India. Additionally, they may announce policies and measures for the monetization of assets of public sector entities. Such a measure would mean creating a framework for asset monetization, which involves the structures to be followed, like auctioning or any other kind of bidding process. To encourage startups, the budget may do away with angel tax for startups. In the 2019-20 budget, startups was exempted from angel tax if the startup complied with certain conditions, and the exemptions were to be revoked with retrospective effect if the conditions are breached. The conditions and restrictions for availing the exemptions are seen as being restrictive and could be revisited. Just to highlight some of these conditions for claiming tax exemption, it was you are required to obtain a certificate of recognition from the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. Secondly, the aggregate amount of post-issue paid up share capital and premium should not exceed 20 rupees 25 crores. Lastly, startups are not to invest in certain specified assets for specific duration. For the power sector, the government could announce a scheme akin to the Uday scheme of 2015 to address the financial constraints of discoms. These measures would be more in ensuring that the discoms bring about the required changes in operation before getting any further support from the government. Also, captive renewable energy policy could also be announced with exemptions from cross subsidy and transmission charges for clean energy plants beyond factory boundaries. We also expect the government to announce privatization of railway stations and running of trains on certain routes. The sector could also be open to foreign investors. Additionally, investors can be allowed to run commercial and real estate businesses, and railways could monetize its assets. While we believe the scale may not be large, it would provide a firm roadmap for the future. The government is likely to undertake additional capital infusion into public sector banks to enable these banks to adhere to their capital adequacy norms and to facilitate lending. Herein, assuming the growth in bank credit during FY20 to 25 to be in the range of 13 to 14% per annum, we estimate the total outstanding bank credit as of FY25 to be around rupees 200 lakh crores. Although the share of PSBs, public sector banks, in bank credit has been declining from 71% as of March 16 to 57% as of March 19, we expect PSBs to account for around 60% of incremental bank credit during this period. Total additional capital required over the next 5 years, as per our estimate, would be around rupees 7 lakh crores. This additional capital will have to be sourced from retained profits of banks, in addition to mobilization from the markets and infusion of funds via the government. The upcoming budget may consider this requirement for recapitalization of banks. In terms of revenue for the government, there could be an increase in non-tax revenue, namely from receipts from telecom companies who could pay part of their adjusted gross revenue dues in tranches over the next few years. There could be a sizable receipt from the RBI by way of surplus transfers too. In the 5 years to 2017-18, the RBI on an average transferred around Rs 50,000 crores to the government as surplus payable. However, in 2018-19, the surplus transferred increased substantially to record highs of Rs 1.47 lakh crores in addition to the interim dividend of Rs 28,000 crores. For 2020-21, the RBI is to follow a rule-based payout as stipulated by the Bimal Jalan Committee. We can expect a surplus transfer of to Rs 1 lakh crores, less the likely interim dividend to be announced in the coming 2 months from the RBI in 2021. I now request Saurabh to take us through the sector-wise expectations from the budget.
Thank you, Kavita. Saurabh here. Moving from the macro expectations, we now delve into some of the sector-specific expectations. Looking at the BFSI segment, our expectations include allocation of additional funds to the three public sector general insurance companies, both for meeting the regulatory limits and ensuring a smoother merger and continued operations. Also undertaking steps towards reducing procedural hassles in securitizing personal and enterprise loans, mortgages, and corporate loans based on the recommendations of the committees set up to study and the same. Also undertake measures for infusing liquidity, both institutional and transactional, for non-banking financial companies and HFCs. And further steps to encourage borrowing for constructing or purchasing homes in middle and lower income groups. Reducing procedures and policies to popularize investment vehicles such as InvITs, REITs, etc. Also strengthening the IBC as well as NCLT for faster debt resolution. Raising the current FDI cap of 49% in the insurance companies. Also increasing the current limit of 25,000 rupees for the health insurance premium available as deduction or individual income taxes. Now, moving on to the oil and gas segment, the government wants to transform India into a gas-based economy, and further, 47% of natural gas consumption is met through LNG imports. We expect LNG customs duty to be waived off the current 2.5% in order to benefit domestic regasification terminals. The oil and gas industry during the FY20 budget received 0.37 lakh crores as subsidies, where 0.33 lakh crore was earmarked as LPG subsidy and the remaining 0.04 lakh crore was given as the kerosene subsidy. Over the years, kerosene consumption has decreased and the penetration of LPG has gained traction. Kerosene consumption declined by close to 30% and 8% respectively during FY19 and FY18 and FY19. Further, because of reduced allocation to states and voluntary surrender of public distribution system quotas by a few states, the government could further reduce kerosene subsidies. The government has achieved the target of disbursing 8 crore LPG connections to families under the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, but the rate of refills has been less than the average. The subsidy earmarked towards kerosene could be diverted toward the LPG subsidy, which can provide aid in the increasing the rate of refills. The fuel subsidy is expected to be in the range of around 0.35 lakh crore. Now, moving on to the fertilizer. The fertilizer industry during the FY20 budget received 0.8 lakh crores as subsidies, out of which 0.54 lakh crore was earmarked for urea and the remaining 0.26 lakh crore was to be the nutrient-based subsidy. The overall fertilizer subsidy has been increased by 14.1% and allocations towards the urea and nutrient-based subsidies were increased by close to 19% and 5% respectively. We anticipate an increase in the allocation towards the nutrient-based subsidy. The focus of the government is to improve the agricultural sphere of the nation and to boost farmer income. In order to achieve the aforementioned goal, the production of fertilizers will have to be increased and to help in increasing the productivity of the land and farm produce, and also aid the sector in increasing DBT 2.0. Increasing the allocation towards the nutrient-based subsidy will encourage the production of decontrolled fertilizers and promote a more balanced usage. The subsidy towards the fertilizer sector can be around 0.8 lakh crore, out of which 0.55 lakh crore could be towards the urea and the balance 0.3 lakh crore towards nutrient-based subsidy. Moving on to the automobile sector, the industry does expect some temporary relief in the form of GST rate cuts from the existing 28% to 18% for the automobiles to boost consumption amid a slowdown in demand and price hikes led by BS6 implementation from April 20. Also, to get outdated and polluting old vehicles, both trucks and buses, off the road, we expect the government to roll out an incentive-based scrappage policy which is to be implemented soon. The policy would make it mandatory to dispose of vehicles older than a stipulated period of time, thereby generating demand for new commercial vehicles. The industry wants the center to incentivize even the private buyers of electric and hybrid cars, not just the ones that put up their vehicles for commercial use, under the Faster Adoption and Manufacturing of Electric and Hybrid Vehicles FAME scheme in order to improve sales and propel demand for EVs and hybrid vehicles. We do expect some announcements here. Additionally, we expect the budget to provide incentives for local manufacturing of EV batteries. Another major foreign exchange earner is the hospitality and tourism sector. While the GST rate for the hotel industry has been brought down in order to improve demand, the industry is now looking for faster GST repayments from the government. One of the major challenges for the tourism industry in India continues to be the availability of adequate infrastructure facilities such as air, ground, and port infrastructure, and tourist service infrastructure and last mile connectivity. The connectivity between tourism circuits needs to be taken up on priority in order to promote domestic as well as foreign tourism in India without accessibility concerns. Clear cruise-friendly policies further encourage international cruise liners to make investments in India and thereby promote cruise holidays in the country. The budget may give export industry status to tourism industry as it is one of the highest export earners, foreign exchange earners. Hospitality industry has maintained a long-standing demand for infrastructure industry status projects with investments over 50 crores. We expect the allocation to the tourism ministry to be higher in the budget vis-a-vis last year. Looking at the drugs and pharmaceutical segment, Indian pharmaceutical players have faced severe headwinds on account of increase in raw material prices, especially key starting materials and intermediates, denting not only the profitability margins but also raising some concerns over continued domestic availability of essential drugs at an appropriate price. Considering this, it is expected that the government may take up initiatives to set up SEZs exclusively dedicated towards manufacturing of the key starting materials and intermediates, and also promote various shops for setting up the same. The pharma players aim to focus on the development of specialty medicines or complex generics, in addition to generics for the portfolio expansion, and thus investments in R&D is crucial. Therefore, any major announcement on tax incentives or SOPs with regards to R&D would augur well for the pharma industry. Looking at aluminium, import duty on CP coke and caustic soda lie. Two of the major raw materials used to make primary aluminium could be reduced. Aluminium industry has to export caustic soda due to the constraint of availability in the domestic market. Together, these two raw materials account for around 30% of the cost of producing aluminum. Currently, the import duty on CP coke and caustic soda is around 10% and 7.5% respectively. Government should look towards boosting the domestic scrap industry. Demand for scrap metal has outpaced the demand for primary metal in the past few years because it is more economical to make downstream aluminum production from recycled scrap than from primary material. However, this increased demand is being met through imports. Import of scrap aluminum has grown from 470 metric tons in FY11 to close to over 1,348 metric tons in FY19. The government should focus on developing a domestic scrap recycling industry, which will help in curbing imports. Further, the much awaited voluntary vehicle scrappage policy needs to be implemented. Scrap recycling also helps in saving energy and is environment friendly. Currently, import duty on aluminium scrap is 2.5%, while import duty on primary aluminium is 7.5%. Looking at the steel industry, import duty on coking coal, which is at 2.5%, could be removed as it is a key raw material in the steel manufacturing industry. And industry depends on the same imports due to lack of domestic availability. The production cost for making steel in India is amongst the highest because of various taxes and royalties. Royalty in coal and iron ore is close to around 20%. Freighted electricity costs in India are also higher compared to China. These should be brought down to make Indian steel more competitive in the global market. The government is expected to increase budget allocation for infrastructure developments and affordable housing projects in the entire country. This will boost demand for steel. Government is also expected to privatize railway operations. The anticipated railway station modernization plans could also boost steel consumption. When we look at copper, the government should address the problem of inverted duty structure facing the copper industry in India. The government levies import duty of 2.5% on copper concentrates, a key raw material, while finished goods are imported at zero duty under various FTAs. Import duty on refined copper is 5%, but most copper concentrates are imported zero duty from countries with which India has FTAs. The primary refined copper producers have no option but to import copper concentrates, as the same is not indigenously available. While this benefits the downstream copper producers, as they can directly import finished goods at nil duty, it is detrimental for the upstream copper industry, copper companies. Looking at the gems and jewellery, there are three expectations for the industry. First is the reduction in the customs duty on various gems and jewellery products, including gold, for curbing illegal activities, increase affordability of gold jewellery in the domestic market, and enhance cost competitiveness of Indian gold jewellery manufacturing in the export market. Secondly, exemption from the payment of IGST on the re-import of goods exported during overseas exhibitions, consignments, export promotion tours, which shall help India promote ease of doing business, increase participation of Indian CPD process in international markets, and ease out some liquidity process pressure on CPD processes. Thirdly, setting up special notified zones for import and trading of rough diamonds, which shall allow diamond mining companies to sell the rough diamonds directly in India. The mining companies will be taxed to the extent of invoices raised to Indian companies, eliminating middlemen involved in the trade. This will help India also become a rough diamond trading hub, help especially small diamond polishing units in India. When we look at the media and entertainment industry, India is an underpenetrated market with just about 8 million screens per million people, compared to 20 screens per million people in China. The requirements for obtaining a cinema license need to be updated, by providing single window clearance mechanism for setting up screens, along with a tax holiday for setting up new multiplexes or for the conversion of single screens to multiplexes. Other demands include reduction of license fee of radio for operating in smaller cities, furthermore granting infrastructure status to the industry. This would enable it in availing better financing options given the high investments required for digitization, technology upgradation, and setting up of multiplex theaters. Include media and entertainment industry definition of industrial undertaking under Section 72A of the Income Tax Act, which allows carry forward and set off of losses. The digitization process and the deployment of set-top boxes requires significant capital. Thus, they should be allowed to be set off and accumulated losses and unabsorbed depreciation allowances to be carried forward. Appropriate measures to combat piracy, which is one of the biggest causes of depleting revenues of film exhibition players. When we come out to the IT and ITES industry, there could be an introduction of weighted average reduction or tax incentives on the skill development activities, R&D activities to be carried out by companies engaged in the industry. There would be more focus on offering additional benefits for encouraging digital payments. Units set up in the CZs and commencing operations on or before 31st March 2020 are eligible for direct tax incentives. One of the expectations is providing tax incentives to units set up in special economic zones beyond this particular date. Furthermore, the industry is also expecting some reduction in the MAT from the current rate of 18.5%. Furthermore, long-term capital gains arising from the share of sales of unlisted companies could be exempt from tax to encourage investments in startups. When we look at telecom, the telecom industry is looking to cut in the spectrum usage charges rate and license fee and refund of input tax credits. Further, the government aims to connect India with the help of digitization. Therefore, the government will continue to allocate funds to the development of telecom infrastructure in rural and remote areas, which is expected to result in allotment of funds from the Universal Services Obligation Fund, apart from helping out companies currently shaken by the AGR dues. When we look at the healthcare segment, to meet the objective of accessibility and affordability of healthcare to all, government is expected to concentrate on the development of healthcare infrastructure, most likely through the public-private partnership. The government will continue to make significant allocation of funds towards its flagship program, the Ayushman Bharat scheme. The budget might see some favorable changes in taxes for the manufacturing of medical equipment domestically to encourage under the Make in India campaign. When we look at education, with the government's increasing focus on improving the education system of the country, the industry expects an increase in fund allocations towards higher education research fund and for completing the work of established higher educational institutions. In the last budget, allocations were around 94,000 crores, and this is expected to increase by about around 5% in this budget. Scholarships for students in higher education who are from economically or socially weaker sections is also a measure that could help. Further looking at the paper and paper production industry, the government could look at increasing the customs duty on coated paper, paper boards, and handmade paper from the current level to protect the domestic industry. The budget will also keep paper and paper products in the negative list while reviewing the existing and formulating new FTAs and agreements. Import safeguards and or stringent environmental norms for the import of waste paper is expected by the industry, along with an optimistically uniform GST rate on all paper grades. When you look at the textiles industry, the government is expected to come with a textiles policy 2020 with a vision to develop the competitive textile sector, which is modern, sustainable, and inclusive with a special focus on manufacturing of apparel and garments, technical textiles, man-made fiber product, and boosting exports while maintaining its position in the handicraft and handloom sectors. Budget allocation for the sector would thus revolve around the focus points of the new policy. When we look at the sugar sector, the government will maintain allocations towards schemes for the development of the sugar industry as the problem of sugarcane arrears continue to remain resolved. With the government aiming to increase diversion of sugar towards ethanol, there might be some higher loan allocation to sugar mills for the production of ethanol. Lastly, when we look at the retail and e-commerce segment, in terms of consumption improvement, the industry wants the government to address the low consumer spending, streamline GST for e-commerce vendors, bringing more parity amongst offline and online vendors, which is something which could find mention in the budget. It could also provide more clarity on guidelines pertaining to the e-commerce policies. The industry's demand for national retail trade policy to promote ease of doing business in the country may be taken up at this point.
By this, we come to an end of the presentation. Dear participant, will be having a break of 2 minutes before we begin our Q&A session. In case of any queries, you are please requested to key in the questions. I repeat, we'll be having a break of 2 minutes before we begin our Q&A session. In case of any queries, you are please requested to key in. Thank you.
Welcome back. Now we move on to the Q&A session of the webinar. The first question is, do you anticipate reduction in income tax rates? As as discussed earlier, the revision in the rates is not expected. However, revision in deductions which could bring down the overall tax liability. Another question is, what was the quantum of investments or fund allocation expected towards the insurance companies in India, general insurance? Well, the government had allocated around 2,500 crores a couple of months ago to meet their regulatory requirements. A similar amount, or around there is expectation of around 10,000 crores to be provided towards these three public sector general insurance companies to meet their regulatory requirements and grow further. With the merged company would be one of the largest general insurance companies in India. The next question is also in the BFSI domain. Do you expect additional funds recapitalization towards banks? As mentioned earlier, we have given a scenario where banks would require fund infusion. A point to be kept in mind is also that implementation of NDS would require fund allocation. Currently, the banks do have adequate recapitalization levels. However, depending on individual bank, the government would need to take a call on whether they would need to be recapitalized, especially considering the ongoing merger process in the public sector banks.
I think there are no more queries coming in, and that was the last query taken up for the day. Thank you again for being a part of this Care Ratings webinar. We hope it was insightful and look forward to your participation in future also. In case of any queries, feedback, or suggestions, you are most welcome to write to us in the comment box, which will be coming no sooner the webinar ends. Thank you and goodbye for now.